Welcome, everyone, to the Jake Dunlap Show. This is your weekly dose of real success stories from entrepreneurs, athletes, celebrities, CEOs, and the people that you love. If you've ever wondered what makes people tick, what are the weird things that happened to them in their past that help to shape the people that they've became, every Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern, you can tune in and get exactly that. The behind the scenes, not the typical behind the scenes, but the real stories that shaped some of the people that you know, love, and follow. All right, so you got this love for music. One thing I read I love is like your dream superpower is that you could just have the ability to pick up any instrument and be immediately proficient. I think a lot of people would wish for that as well, especially like college time, right? You can just whip out the piano or the guitar. Where did that come from? Like, where do you think, like, again, were your parents into music or what got you into that?
My parents are very much into music. I started listening to music as a young kid. I immediately connected to it. My parents inspired me with great stuff. They love Beatles. They love Elvis, but they also got into all of the, the Bee Gees and the Beach Boys, like, and the deep track stuff too, right? Like the really interesting stuff. And then MTV came out, and I remember I'd hold my recorder up and like record the songs that were coming on MTV. And I just, so I sort of had that love, right, forever. And then, a couple of my friends started, one started like writing songs and like doing things like that. One started learning keyboard. I started learning keyboard. I got a bass guitar. I got a guitar. And so like it was sort of a friend generated thing, and it just sort of stuck and carried on and has stayed with me till today.
What was the name of that band? Like, what was the name of your first band?
We had a boy. You're hitting. We had a embarrassing. We had a band. Our name was Manic Oppressive. Was the name of our band in high school.
So good, and it's pre-YouTube, so we probably can't find anything on YouTube. Or we like to link to that stuff.
No, you cannot, nor should you.
In the show notes, it's fun to like go back and find some of this stuff. And so, when did you get into DJing? Because that was another thing that you started to get into. Like, and what I heard is like, was it primarily R&B, or was it everything, 90s and 80s?
It was heavy R&B, but we branched out. But the name, myself and my friend Bryce started DJing R&B. Yeah, I mean, the creativity is just off the charts. But I mean, that was really my first job. And I was doing, so I started doing that when I was 15. I had a birthday party. I got some money for my birthday party. I bought, like a household speakers, made some money, upgraded it to like legitimate, can like, play in a big cafeteria or wedding or whatever. And I did all the high school dances starting in 10th grade. I would do weddings, and, I would charge, $50 an hour at the time to DJ, and that's inexpensive for what a DJ charges. But for a 16-year-old kid, that's an uncalculable amount of money, right? So like I would get all, it was like a real income, but it was a lot of fun. And then college, I sort of like veered away from it, but I love doing it because again, you're sort of like exploring music, you get your lineup. It was a lot of cassettes and then CDs. When CDs became a thing, obviously way easier. And like, it was a good run. It was a lot of fun, but yeah, there was a lot of R&B. I mean,
well, look, I'm an R&B. For those of you who know me, I'm a 90s R&B, individual. So this is very near and dear to my heart. Who was your, I was going to ask you this, like, what was your R&B like go-to? Like, what were some of like and I'm sure it evolved over time, but it's the high school prom or whatever. Like, what's the song that you're going to either like close it down with, or is going to get everyone hype?
Everyone hype. I mean, Mary J. Blige, Bobby Brown, later MC Hammer when he was blowing up. All of that, Boys to Men, Philly Proud, Boys to Men. Those were huge, and those were the go-tos that everybody loved and lit up over. Yeah,
that's right. We'll link to some of this for people. So, I was I've seen Keith Sweat in concert 3 times now, maybe 4. Blackstreet, New Edition, whenever they got back together, that was a great reunion tour. Casey and JoJo, Oh, so good. 90s R&B, telling you what.
It was a great age for R&B. It really was. I mean, there was so much. Yeah, that was probably 70% of my catalog was all of that.
I love it. I love it. Trust me, I can relate. So how did you get into? So you ended up going to Penn State, not too far away. Like what point did you get into? I mean, you're majoring in logistics and supply chain, but then obviously, you go in, you start to get involved in, the world of tech. What point did you start to kind of get involved more on the, technology and, engineering side?
Yeah, totally. As I was like wrapping up, I mean, Penn State has like this amazing nationally recognized logistics and supply chain program. That's what got me into it. But as I was getting through it, I was like, it's actually all the technology stuff that's happening, right? Like supply demand forecasting, supply chain planning. Like those were the classes where I was like, this is fascinating stuff. And I started to figure out the common patterns. Like, yeah, this is the technical stuff. Like this is the early days of enterprise software being, leveraged by companies to make smart decisions. And that was the interesting stuff. And even just personally, like I remember when CD Now launched, right? And you could go online and buy music and have it sent to your house. That was huge. I remember sitting in the Penn State labs. I didn't have a computer at the time where I could do that, and like going in there to use it to like buy CDs and send it to my house. Right. So like I was like fascinated by all that stuff. I'm like, all right, well, I'm not gonna change majors, but hey, what if I really just took there's sort of some paths, right? You could take logistics down, like literally going to a logistics company. I ended up joining a logistics software company, which oddly was based in Philadelphia. I say oddly because there were not a lot of software companies in Philadelphia in the year 2000. There were very, very few, but this was one of them. And so I was like, okay, great. This is a way to merge like my major with what I'm really passionate about. And that sort of got me in the door of like into the world of technology. And I joined the R&D team and I was doing QA. I went back to school and learned how to code. I never was great at coding, but I think it did help me understand better how the products that were being sold to these companies worked and that sort of thing. And it was sort of like never looked back from there.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I think it's interesting just how these different choices, and like random things. Did you also, for those of you who don't know, back in this time too, not only could you buy CDs online, you could also get this thing called Columbia House. Okay. For those of you who don't remember Columbia House, this is like where you could get like the parental advisory stuff. Do you remember this? Where they would literally ship you like 10 CDs for like 5 cents. Oh, it was so great. And then you could literally not pay them because you were a kid. And oh my gosh, that's how I got like early Mystical before he joined No Limit and some other players. And I'm like if my parents found these, like, my Montel Jordan CD, like all my music back then was Columbia House. It was pretty great. For 1 penny, you got 10 CDs. If anybody remembers those days.
It was. I can't even tell you how that business model worked today because yes, I remember that. I remember getting stacks of CDs and I'm like, how am I getting this?
They don't care. They're like, oh, you had all this explicit side. They're like 14 or so 13 or something, just shipping it in. Parents are like, here you go. Like I also think about my parents. Like, why is my, high school son getting this package of things? It's like my parents also, I'll blame them for that too. But no, I'm glad they looked the other way. So you go to work for somebody for a little bit and then you start a company, a few years out, right? So you kind of go back to school, you get kind of, you understand kind of the tech side of it. And then you found Boomi. What was it that you decided like, hey, I'm going to go out on my own? What was that process like for you?
Totally, yeah. So the problem that we saw, there were originally 3 of us that started Boomi, and the problem that we saw was every time this logistics software was deployed within these customers, there was this massive integration effort, and that is connecting that logistics system into SAP or whatever other software existed within the company. Hugely complex. It was always the reason that the deployments were late and customers were always upset, and it would always point back to integration. We're like, okay, well, what, the way it was being solved then was writing custom code. You just go in and stitch together these systems, and it's very brittle and fragile, and it broke. And we're like, okay, well, what if we productize that? What if we build a way where you could connect these systems together and not have to, write code to do it? And so that was the problem. And then was working at the same company with these two other guys, and we sort of got, excited, and we started talking about it. And we started talking about what if we could do it on our own, and what if we could go out and solve this problem. And frankly, like the EXE Software was the name of the company at the time. They're now under the Infor umbrella, but like, hey, they probably would be partners of ours, and when we could go and do this. And so that we did that, and that started in March of 2000. So I was only there for 2 years. So I was 24 when that started. And the three of us kind of launched out and began.
And what are some early memories you have, or like big lessons from like the first half of scaling? Because eventually 2010, you end up selling to Dell, and you're going to stay for a little bit. But what are some things that you remember early on, or lessons learned around, kind of the initial scaling of the business?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, there was kind of two Boomis, is how I always talk about it. And there's the Boomi that those that are familiar with the company would know today. And that is the cloud, what people will call an integration platform as a service. Boomi 1, I learned a ton of, painful, but in now in hindsight, very valuable lessons. And so like the first one was like founder conflict. Really rough. I mean, that, I said we started in 2000. By 2003, I was the only founder left. There was a lot of strife and conflict. I think if I were to summarize 2 points of learning, like number one, I would never start a company and not have clarity around, for lack of a better word, who the CEO is. Well, a better way to say it is like, who's the ultimate decision maker? Because we walked in there, we're like, we're fine. We'll make all these decisions, everything. It'll be unanimous. And as soon as we hit a conflict, we're like, now what? Like, who decides, And like, that was a mess, and a lot of pain, and a lot of just wasted time having internal conversations that weren't actually like solving problems for customers. And then related to that too is we all had the same skills. Like, we all came into the company, and it came out of the R&D. We were all engineers, QA, like we were all just this people that had these kind of like redundant skill sets. And so we didn't complement each other as well as I think we could have. And, that caused problems around like who's working on what, right? So yeah, by 2003, I was the only one left. We had a really truest in the sense of the word angel investor, Mike West, who wrote the first check into the company in 2000. He was a CIO. He lived the pain personally of integration, so he got what we were doing. He wrote the first check into the company. He would join as interim CFO, and he played so many roles in keeping that company, stable and on sound footing. He was a mentor to me, taught me a ton, but like, really helped get the company to the place where we became what I would call Boomi 2.0, which became the reinvention. And the final thing I would say that got seared into my brain is like, we also set all those things aside, right? Like the early product of Boomi, we quickly realized there was like 50 of us. I mean, you had these bigger companies that were raising capital. Microsoft came out with a product called BizTalk, maybe a year after we had started, that was really trying to do the exact same thing. You go and read their website and what they're doing, and like, oh boy, who wants to be competing with Microsoft when you're a handful of people early stage with a product that doesn't have a clear, compelling differentiation? I remember walking into an investor's office with this like data sheet we had created, and we were all proud of it. We're like, look at this, we're going to use this to talk to our customers. And he looks at it and he's like, okay, so if you replace the word Boomi with, this competitor right here, and you read it again, would it be accurate? And we were like, oh, like it was so like, okay, we are so missing. And just what got seared into my brain is the idea of differentiation and the idea of how you make your approach unique and novel. And it's something that sounds very obvious to me now, but that's only because it was so burned into my brain then, something I took with me. So that was kind of the Boomi 1.0 chapter. Boomi 2.0, really applied a lot of that, brought in another partner, a guy named Bob Mao, who came in. I sort of operated as CTO. He operated as CEO, very complementary skill sets. I mean, he just was someone who had run software businesses for a while. He had a great eye at sort of like how to take a complicated technology and talk about it in a simple way. And, we really sort of we literally called it Boomi 2.0, but it was a truly cloud native. It was a bet. And the bet was like truly a bet. And it was like a burn the ships bet, right? It was like, okay, if the world is going to move to cloud, if this is not a fad, if this is real, because you talk in 2006, we started on this path. And who was in the cloud then? It was Salesforce, NetSuite, handful of cloud companies back then. But if the world moves that way, the way these products connect together and get integrated is going to be fundamentally different than the way it's done in the on-premise world. So let's build a product for that future and literally rebuild it toward that. And we did that, and that is the Boomi that exists today. Of course, it's evolved a ton over the years, but that concept was what we shifted to and really changed the trajectory of the company as we launched it. And we started riding, partnering with folks like Salesforce who really were driving, every time they deployed, there was this integration problem. It really propelled the company forward. And I feel fortunate through the pain, but feel fortunate in like really having that eye on the role innovation can play and really rethinking old problems in new ways. And it was, it's ultimately something I look back on very fondly. Maybe not those those early dark days, but ultimately very, very something I'm very happy about. We had two partners come inbound. And if anyone's been in these conversations before, right? There's very different conversations, right? There's the corp dev folks who tire kick and look and see if they can get a deal, and then there's the co-founder of the company or number two. I remember Steve Felice at Dell, who was direct report to Michael Dell, ran all of SMB globally for Dell, flew into Philly, sat in our office and met with us. We're like, okay, this is real. This is serious. This is something they really want to explore and talk about. And there was another company that was in a very similar spot. And through this process and through understanding what these folks wanted to do, what their vision was, we were like, boy, this feels like it's these inflection points I think a lot of founders face. It's like, okay, we could raise the next round of funding, or we could go down this path. And obviously we chose the path. But I think it was a really great example of, where partnerships can authentically and organically lead to strategic outcomes. I say authentically and organically, I think it can be weird if you try to engineer it and try to build something that's perfect for someone. There's kind of only one path, but when partners really are an important part of your go-to-market, as it was the case in Boomi, it became this very organic conversation where these guys were like, look, we need to own this. The integration's strategic enough for us. We need to own it. And so what do you think? And we went down the path. And I always say Dell was a really fantastic acquirer, in the sense that they had done it a bunch of times, the process of acquiring, the process of integrating, and were just really thoughtful about it. And I look back on that too and think wow, really sort of did everything they said they were going to do a post-acquisition. It's always a nervous time, right? But really, I think really did a nice job with the company.
Yeah, that's awesome. And obviously it ended up being a great outcome for you. And he stuck with it past, the 1.0. And I think sometimes it's, you brought in a partner. I think some of the lessons, just kind of making some notes. It's, I think sometimes it can be, whether it's ego or other things, where you're like, I can do it, I can figure it out. And I think, sometimes you get to that point where you're like, look, I need to bring in someone. And then you bring it in and it's like, oh my God, what did I do before this? And so it sounds like, again, as you made that run, and how did that kind of impact? Obviously, Guru, I think, was, kind of founded out of, again, similar to how you on Boomi, or the thing that you saw, right? You're like, hey, there's a issue or gap here. For you, when was it time to leave? And then how did you think about, kind of going back and starting all over again?
And I became convinced of the problem around knowledge sharing, knowledge management. First, when we tried to do it ourselves. So as we were growing Boomi, we tried setting up wikis. We tried setting up intranet sites. Nobody used them. Basically, you'd set them up. There'd be a little fanfare, and then they would just kind of fade into the background, and then the information would go stale, and then you sort of have this downward spiral of non-adoption. And I was like, boy, this seems important. Yeah, yes, knowledge walks out the door with it. Yes. And then when we were acquired by Dell, the need for that knowledge sharing, went up tenfold, because now you're trying to enable, product knowledge, and positioning to a much broader organization beyond just Boomi. And, they had things like intranet sites set up and just no one was using them. And there wasn't a way to do it. So what ended up happening, right? What ended up happening was me and my team were on countless calls, flying to countless places to do enablement work, right? To sort of do knowledge sharing, because there was no source of truth. There was no concept of self-service. And we're like, this is madness, right? And then I remember going to, sort of towards my end, I started building conviction for this. I'm like, how are there not products that are good at doing this? And I remember going to this Gartner event, and I remember sitting in this session and it was an intranet vendor in the session, or excuse me, the session was about an intranet vendor. The vendor was nowhere in the room, but it was about that intranet vendor. And there were 5 Gartner analysts sitting up on stage and a room full of people, and the session starts. And I'm sitting in the back to just listen and learn. And I start seeing the emotion of the room start to pick up, because these are people who own the internet within these companies, and it's not going well and people aren't using it. And they're standing up and they're asking questions to Gartner, and they're raising their voices, and they're like, when's this going to change? And when will we have that? And, the poor Gartner analysts are up there like getting hammered, like they're the vendor, and like they're not, it was wild. And I walked out of that session and I'm like, I have to start this company, like with that much emotion and energy in the room about a product that had many, many hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and that amount of dissatisfaction. I'm like, this seems like there's something here. And that sort of that was the tipping point. So I was at Dell for almost 3 years. I did kind of a 4-month transition. I didn't want to rush out. I wanted to make sure Boomi was in a good place by the time I had left. I had a great successor, who was running product at the time, named Chris McNabb, who was Boomi's CEO for 10 plus years after I left. Did a phenomenal job growing the business. So that sort of shored all of that up, and then started Boomi, and started it with my co-founder Mitch Stewart, who was running engineering at Boomi. So he had been through all those dark days at Boomi, and was our first, what I call, professional engineer who went on and built a lot of the hard stuff at Boomi, and then built a team around him and ran engineering. And so I couldn't have thought of a better kind of partner to go on the guru journey with. And so he left Boomi/Dell with me to start in the end of 2013, 2014. I would say things that didn't feel any easier. Pricing. I think pricing is getting pricing right is as hard as actually building the product. They were very different challenges at Boomi than they were at Guru, but hard. I would say the journey of getting to product market fit also didn't feel any easier at Guru than it did at Boomi. In that you are someone, I think it was David Cancel at Drift had this awesome analogy that always stuck with me. I heard him say it 5 years ago. He's like, when you don't have product market fit, imagine you're standing in a desert and you're trying to see product market fit, so you walk through the desert. Well, are you actually walking deeper into it, or are you walking out towards the oasis and the water and the trees, right? And the thing is, you don't know, right? Because no one knows your brand. No one really cares about what you do. To get businesses to buy any software, period, is hard, because it's just hard, because it takes change and all of these things, right? And that was just a hard journey. I think things that we really centered on that were strengths of building a business would be around what I would call culture. Everyone calls it culture, but what I would really frame around how do you actually define your culture through a set of written values that you bring to life in your company, and really kind of maniacally reinforce through company rituals and things like that. And I think that's been something we've centered on. I think Boomi had accidentally good culture, in that I think we hired people that sort of ascribed to certain cultural identities we wanted. I think at Guru, we were more intentional, and eventually, learned how to build a talent team that would also look to help find people that were connected and compatible with our company values and that sort of thing. And so I think that one was probably good. I think there was probably a lot of things around scaling and around how, thinking about raising venture capital, which was something we had done at both companies, that felt way easier at Guru. Starting 2 companies in Philadelphia, one being in 2000, one being in 2013, world of difference. I think it went from if you're not in Silicon Valley, then that's an objection you have to immediately overcome. And then New York became another tech hub, but Philly wasn't. And fast forward to today, Excel led our last Series C round and would actually say, like, we think it's great to actually back companies that aren't in tech hubs. We think there's actually an inherent advantage. Of course, now it's all changed again. Now the idea of, like, what does a tech hub mean in a world where so many people are working remote and hybrid and choosing, starting more and more to choose where they live based on where they want to live versus where their job is. That's all changing. But at the time, just that, what it was like building in a non-tech hub was I think something that became a hard objection to in the guru journey. Honestly, probably a strength, and an opportunity that we took advantage of.
And again, obviously, with the pandemic, etc. That kind of increased even, I think, the need for people to have tools like a guru to connect and stay on top of things, where again, you can't just go over to someone's desk and it's like, what's that thing again? Or like, how do I do that or whatever? So I'm sure that was a, kind of interesting, few years. And, as we kind of, we start to wrap up here in a little bit, I'm curious, if we kind of shift gears a little bit to kind of the world that you're seeing now. So I can imagine, like, the pandemic kind of accelerated people wanting to, have and really understand the importance of some of these tools. How do you see that kind of shaping the future of how people work? And I've talked to a lot of different guests who have played different parts in this about that question. Like, what are some of the big trends that you're seeing, and things that get you excited?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'll start with maybe some harder times, right? I think in the pandemic, um, forget that we all shifted to remote. It's not just that we went to remote work. We did, obviously. And that shift has long remained. And I think people will call it hybrid. People will call it remote. I think the idea that 9 to 5, Monday through Friday office is the norm has effectively gone away from what it was. So if you sort of think about that, the first thing, at least what we felt inside of Guru, was the connectedness. And let's start at the company level, right? Like, how do we communicate what is going on to people in a succinct way? And I think what we all did in the beginning is we all recreated all of our office rituals. Like, we just remain synchronous. We remain live. So we're like, all right, well, we're just going to do all the stuff we did, but now we'll do it over Zoom. And then when we need to talk to each other, we'll just use messaging products and we'll just sort of recreate all that and nothing will change. And I think now people are going, well, wait, why are we doing that? Because it's actually not better. That alone is not actually better because Zoom fatigue, Zoom burnout, these things are very real. They everyone experiences some version of that, right? And so I think that has led to truly starting to look at these rituals and start to be intentional about being asynchronous. And so when you're communicating something, do you have to gather everyone in a room, physical or virtual anymore, and talk about it live at a time when everyone happens to be available, when people are in different time zones at different places? What if instead you had a brief 15-minute update that was delivered via text or video? And, of course we use Guru for that, but regardless, like let people consume that as they want and engage in that as they want, right? Like, keep people informed through different techniques instead of just the live in-person town hall that everyone has to gather around, which is in many ways kind of a monologue oftentimes. How could you actually change that, right? So that's a great one. How is a decision made, right? That's a great one. I mean, you can see companies like Amazon that are famous for having the, like, written memo and, like, ways they have asynchronous decision making built in. But for a lot of us, that wasn't really a thing. But imagine now taking the process of how you make a decision within your team and going, do we need to be in the room together to make that decision? Or can I actually write a decision doc, send it to you and go, Jake would love your feedback on that. You'll comment on that. When we actually meet together, we're like 90% of the way done because we had so many turns in an asynchronous format together that when we actually sat down together and talked, like, it was kind of just sealing it, right? And that has been an amazing boost in effectiveness for our team and kind of getting that going.
What do you all use for that? Yeah, what do you use to do that? I think, and we've started to do this internally quite a bit, and I noticed the same thing where it was like, I think you also had a group of people that, because that they really liked the in office and they liked bumping in and random, that kind of created this over meeting culture. It's like, and I think it's like they're just having the meetings because they're like, because they're somewhat lonely, and it's very real. It's like, well, let me hop on the call. It's like, no. Send it. We use a tool called Vidyard to do the videos, but internally there's Loom. There's, obviously you can do some of the stuff in Guru too. How do you do that collaboration without being in a meeting? I think, I'm very selfish in asking this, but I think a lot of people out there are like, hell yeah, if I can get out of some meetings, man, I'm in. So like, how do you see companies effectively collaborating? I mean, there's the asynchronous kind of updates and communications, but true, whether it's brainstorm or collaboration, how do you see companies doing that really effectively now?
So I think there's written documents, which could be anything from a Google Doc, to a tool choice of document, right? But that document is not the result. That's the collaborative, let's figure it out and get to the result. Loom for asynchronous video, absolutely. Figma, Miro, Mural for the canvas, if that's needed. Yep, absolutely. Slack for conversations around all of that. And then when it is a decision that has been made, you memorialize that in Guru. So some place that is designed for the one-to-many distribution of that once it is in fact confirmed decision. It could be, here's how this feature is going to work, and so we need to write that and prepare for the launch of the feature, whatever it might be. But you can imagine this collaborative set, and you get to the end of it, and you have these assets at the end. You want to manifest those assets to be, distributed out to the broad team. But your question is really like, okay, well, getting up to that decision. Yeah, I think those are the tools that I think are emerging, that are playing these vital roles in allowing people to do this collaboration. I'm working on someone with a coworker right now, and we're using Figma. And we've never met live on this thing we're working on right now. And I send it, and she'll send me something back, and she'll use a Loom to explain what she's doing. And then by the end of it, it's done. We never actually talked live. And it was sort of like, as we both had time, we go back and forth. And I think it's early days, but I think that's like an amazingly powerful opportunity for us to kind of get right. And I also want to go back to the in-office thing, because you talked about the happy hours, the team building. I think the other thing we don't want to forget is it's not a binary thing. I think that we can truly figure out, like, what is work best done in person? What is work best done at home? And how do we optimize towards that? Before the pandemic, everyone was complaining about open office floor plans. You go back and Google it, right? Like, that was the problem then. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's too noisy. I wear headphones. The productivity killer. Right? Yes, exactly. Right. So like, that was a big problem. That now everyone's going back to work. But I think, to your point about the human connection, it's real. Absolutely. And so I don't think the answer either is like no one ever sees each other. Right. But if you imagine a place where we can have an intentional workplace strategy where we're designing that work, there are teaming agreements where they're saying, hey, when we're doing a design heavy thing, we want to be sitting in a room together. We want to do this together. We want to do team building. We want to go to dinner together. Like, we have to make space for that, while also, hey, without a doubt, for certain in the zone, deep focus tasks, if I'm sitting at home or wherever I'm sitting where I'm alone, I'm going to get that done 2-3 times as fast. I mean, without a doubt, right? So I think that's what I mean when I say we have this opportunity to combine the best of both, where we can go, what was great about when we sat in an office? What's great about when we're remote? How do we really bring the best of those things together? I think we can do something really amazing here. But again, like some of the headlines, right? When you start branding this topic as employee friction, or employees are threatening to leave because they don't have flexibility, you're doing this like management against employee. It's this unnecessarily dramatized thing. What does everybody want? Every employee wants to be effective. Every company leader wants their company to be successful. We want the same thing. I think we should just stop making it about this, like, it's this battle. It doesn't have to be, right? It can be something where we recognize, how can we make our team as effective as they can be, And it's through these combinations, right? So I think there's a great opportunity. I think we kind of need to change the narrative a little bit and recognize that there's a lot of goodness that can happen here, honestly.
I think that it's such a good call out. And I think too, it's also, I think, if you're, not in, leadership potentially, I would say, I think you'd be surprised at, being overly communicative up and just letting people know like, hey, this is how I prefer, like what I'm into. I think more and more people need to speak up and just be very clear too about, how they want to work remote, as opposed to assuming that, people are like them. And so as we kind of wrap up now, again, the kind of the last question, and you answered part of it, what are the things that you're most excited about looking forward? Whether it's personal life, professional world, like what are kind of the trends or thing that you're most excited about?
Yeah. I mean, if I can, I think I'll just play off that point you just made, because I thought it was such a wonderfully important point. Like if I were to distill like my 8 years of Guru and be like, what's one thing you would say within the category and the problems we solve, and not just Guru, but broadly around collaboration and knowledge management, it's what you just said. When companies treat an initiative around collaboration, employee engagement, when they treat that as a product and they recognize that their employees are their internal customers and they just ask them what they want, to your point, the employees will not be shy. They will share what they want, and they will tell you if they are happy with collaboration. They will tell you if they can find the information they need to do their jobs or not. They will tell you. You don't have to guess. And if you design answers to that are rooted in the things they are asking for, your company will perform better. But there is this weird propensity too often where you do this like force feed. I'm going to top down this onto the team and I'm going to do this forced adoption. And I can tell you every single time, immediately when you talk to companies and you see which one they are, you can predict success and you can predict failure 100%. And so I would just say, like, the more you can just ask your employees, use ENPS surveys, use employee engagement mechanics to pull out of the team, they will tell you, and the nuggets that they will tell you are gold because they're living it every day. And when you give them what they want, they will perform better. Your company will perform better. And it's a beautiful thing. So that is what I'm excited about. I think
It's great, man. I think it's a great point. And I think for a lot of people, I see people leave jobs because of this stuff as well too, where, and I would just, you can shape, I think people can shape a lot more of the experience they want at work if they just, pick their head up. Sure, there's bad companies, but I kind of tend to believe that most leaders are actually deep down pretty good people and want the best for everybody. And I think there's such an opportunity now in particular to really think and take a step back after this podcast, if you're listening, here at the end, and just say, what do I want my work experience to be like? And I think I'm just seeing more and more people ask themselves that question and get exactly what they want. And so I think it's a really, really great point, and a great one to wrap up on. So Rick, big thank you for joining me, man. It was a lot of fun. Anytime we could just do a whole nother episode, just chopping it up about like top R&B songs of the 90s and debate, was Blackstreet overrated? What about 702? You can't sleep on 702. Like we can go deep on it. People are like, well, who the hell are these people? But look it up. You'll see it.
Yeah. It seems like some live music might be in our future too. That seems like a to-do for me and you. Yeah.
I'll hit it. I'll hit you up, man, the next time something comes through. So, well, look, really enjoyed it. Appreciate all of you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show. Thank you, everyone, again for listening to another episode. If you are listening all the way to the end, I hope you have left a review. I hope that you make sure that you're following or subscribing on your favorite podcast listening apparatus. We'll be back next Thursday. And again, make sure to check out the Monday episodes as well, too. A lot of people are really enjoying these kind of mini episode Mondays. So make sure to tune in, subscribe, and leave a review.